In the deepest corners of the galaxy, where starlight barely reaches and ancient civilizations whisper of legends long forgotten, there exists a name that freezes the blood of even the most battle-hardened warriors. The Kithaeron Empire, masters of 1,000 worlds, conquerors who have never known defeat, wielders of technology so advanced it might as well be magic to lesser species. For 12,000 years, their crimson fleets have swept across star systems like a plague, turning entire civilizations to ash and memory. No army has ever stood against their might and lived to tell the tale. No world has ever resisted their advance for more than a solar cycle. No species has ever dared to look a Kithaeron warlord in the eye and say no. Until today. Today, a small blue planet on the outer rim of the Orion Spiral, a world the Kithaeron's dismiss as primitive, inhabited by hairless apes who have barely learned to leave their own atmosphere, will teach the galaxy's greatest predators what it truly means to be prey. Today, the Kithaeron Empire will learn why Earth's children don't just fight wars. They perfect them. The massive shadow fell across Earth's moon first, blotting out stars that had shone for billions of years. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of Lunar Base 7, her weathered hands gripping the railing as she watched the impossible sight unfold before her. The Kithaeron flagship emerged from hyperspace like a mountain of black metal and crimson energy, its hull stretching nearly 50 kilometers from bow to stern. Behind it, more ships materialized, dozens then hundreds, until the space around Earth's satellite resembled a metallic storm cloud pregnant with death. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "It's on all frequencies, every language database we have." She nodded grimly. She had expected this moment for the past 3 years, ever since the deep space monitoring stations had detected the Kithaeron fleet's approach. Earth's governments had spent those years in frantic preparation, building weapons, training soldiers, and constructing defensive installations that now seemed pathetically inadequate in the face of what hung in their sky. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a face that belonged in nightmares. The Kithaeron commander was tall and angular, his skin the color of dried blood, marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless victories. For eyes, each the size of a human fist, fixed their gaze upon the camera with predatory intensity. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of empires and the certainty of gods. "Primitive creatures of the third planet," the alien commander intoned, his words translated by the ship's computer in a crisp, emotionless English. "I am War Sovereign Zekthul of the Kithaeron Empire, Herald of the Crimson Throne, Breaker of Worlds. Your species has been evaluated and found suitable for servitude. Your resistance capabilities have been calculated and deemed negligible." Chun felt her jaw clench. Around the command center, technicians and officers watched in stunned silence as their death sentence was delivered with the casual indifference of someone ordering dinner. "You will surrender your military assets within 1 solar rotation," Zekthul continued. "Your population will be cataloged and processed according to imperial decree. Compliance will result in swift integration into our labor force. Resistance will result in the systematic elimination of your species and the subsequent mining of your planet's core materials." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the command center in a silence so complete that Chun could hear her own heartbeat. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of 12,000 years of Kithaeron military supremacy pressed down upon them like a physical thing. Then Torres cleared his throat. "Admiral, shall I open a channel to respond?" Chun turned away from the screen, her mind already working through the preparations that had consumed Earth's military leadership for 3 long years. The Kithaerons had made one crucial mistake in their evaluation of humanity. They had assumed that a species' capacity for war could be measured in technology alone. "Open all channels," she ordered. "Military command, civilian leadership, and emergency broadcast networks. It's time." The lieutenant's fingers danced across his console. "All channels open, ma'am." You're broadcasting to every human being on Earth, Luna, and the colonies. Chun straightened her uniform and looked directly into the camera. When she spoke, her voice carried none of the fear that churned in her stomach, only the iron determination that had kept humanity alive since they first learned to make fire. This is Admiral Sarah Chun, commanding officer of United Earth Defense Command. 68 minutes ago, an alien force calling themselves the Kithran Empire demanded our surrender. They believe we are a primitive species incapable of meaningful resistance. They have given us 24 hours to submit to slavery or face extinction. She paused, letting those words sink in to every human ear listening. They are about to discover that they have made a grave miscalculation. For the past 3 years, since we first detected their approach, we have prepared for this moment. Not just with weapons and ships, though we have built those too. We have prepared with something the Kithrans cannot understand, something that their 12,000 years of conquest have never taught them to recognize. In living rooms across Earth, families gathered around screens. On lunar mining stations, workers stopped their extraction operations. In the asteroid belt, colonists floating in zero gravity listened to words that would change everything. We are human beings, Chun continued, her voice rising with conviction. We're the species that looked at an endless ocean and built boats. We're the species that saw the sky and learned to fly. We're the species that stood in the shadow of predators 10 times our size and decided to become the predators instead. Every scar in our history, every war we have fought, every lesson we have learned in 10,000 years of conflict has prepared us for this moment. Behind her, through the observation windows, the Kithran fleet hung in space like a promise of doom. She did not look back at it. The Kithrans have conquered 1,000 worlds, but they have never fought humans. They know nothing of Stalingrad or Thermopylae. They have never heard of the Alamo or Rorke's Drift. They do not understand what it means to fight a species that considers surrender a form of death. On Earth, in military bunkers buried deep beneath mountains, technicians began powering up weapons systems that had never been tested in actual combat. In orbital shipyards hidden behind debris fields, captains took command of vessels designed for one purpose: to make the Kithrans remember this day for the rest of their empire's existence. In 4 hours, Chun announced, Operation Broken Crown will commence. Every human being in this system, military and civilian, adult and child, will play a part in teaching our would-be conquerors that there are some species in this galaxy that cannot be broken, cannot be enslaved, and cannot be defeated. She leaned closer to the camera, and for a moment, every human being listening could see the fire that burned behind her eyes. The Kithrans believe they are our superiors. They will learn that they are prey. The transmission ended. In the command center, Torres looked up from his console. Ma'am, we're receiving response signals from every defense station, every ship, every outpost in the system. They're all reporting ready status. Chin nodded and walked back to the observation window. The Kithran fleet still hung there, magnificent and terrible, confident in their superiority. She wondered if Zekthul was watching Earth's small blue sphere right now, calculating how long it would take to break the human spirit. Signal all commanders, she ordered. Operation Broken Crown is authorized. Let's show them what it means to fight a Terran war beast. Across the solar system, a species that had never known defeat prepared to meet a species that had never learned to surrender. In the cold vacuum of space, two philosophies of war were about to collide with the force of colliding galaxies. The Kithrans had their technology, their experience, their unbroken string of victories. Humanity had something else entirely. They had each other, and they had rage. War Sovereign Zekthul stood in the command center of his flagship, the Crimson Extinction, studying the tactical displays with the practiced eye of a commander who had overseen the conquest of 47 star systems. The human homeworld hung before them like a blue-green jewel, seemingly defenseless, its primitive orbital installations barely worth the energy required to destroy them. Scan reports confirm initial assessment. War Sovereign. reported as tactical coordinator, a lean Kithran female whose scars spoke of campaigns across 3 galactic sectors. Minimal orbital defenses, outdated propulsion technology, kinetic weapons systems, approximately 8,000 years behind our current standards. Zekthal nodded, unsurprised. It was always the same with these young species. They developed space flight, grew bold, then encountered the Empire and learned their true place in the galactic hierarchy. The humans would surrender within the hour, once they realized the futility of resistance. "Deploy standard intimidation formation," he ordered. "Bring us within weapons range, but do not engage. Once they see our firepower, they will—" The first indication that something was wrong came from the sensor operator, whose 4 eyes had widened to the size of dinner plates. "War Sovereign, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Multiple launch sites are going active across the northern hemisphere." Zekthal's expression shifted from bored confidence to mild interest. "Show me." The main display shifted to show Earth's surface, where dozens of previously invisible installations were suddenly blazing with energy signatures. Massive structures were rising from what had appeared to be empty terrain, silos, launch platforms, and weapon emplacements that had been hidden beneath sophisticated camouflage systems. "Interesting," Zekthal mused. "The primitives have more cunning than expected. What are they launching?" His answer came in the form of streaks of light rising from Earth's surface. Not dozens, but hundreds, then thousands of projectiles climbing through the atmosphere at velocities that made the sensor operator recalibrate his instruments 3 times before believing the readings. "War Sovereign," the tactical coordinator reported, her voice carrying the first note of uncertainty Zekthal had heard from her in 20 years of service. "Those projectiles are accelerating beyond expected parameters. Their velocity curve suggests this is impossible. No kinetic weapon should be able to achieve those speeds without tearing itself apart." The first wave of missiles struck the outer perimeter of the Kithran formation like meteors hitting a mountain. Except these meteors had been designed by a species that had spent 3 years studying captured Kithran technology, learning its weaknesses, and building weapons specifically designed to exploit them. The Kithran Vengeance, a destroyer-class vessel on the fleet's starboard flank, took 17 direct hits in the span of 4 seconds. Its shields, energy barriers that had withstood the fire of entire planetary defense networks, flickered and collapsed under the concentrated assault. The vessel's hull, forged from metals harder than diamond, cracked and split as kinetic penetrators traveling at 10% of light speed punched through its armor like bullets through tissue paper. "Impossible," breathed the tactical coordinator as she watched one of the Empire's most advanced warships break apart in a cascade of explosions and debris. Their technology readings were confirmed. "They shouldn't be capable of War Sovereign." The communications officer's voice cut through the command center like a blade. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Human fleet?" Zekthal spun toward the sensor displays. "There is no human fleet. Our scouts confirmed they barely possess interplanetary capability." The main screen shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at the interior of what was unmistakably a warship's bridge. The human standing in its center was a woman of middle years. Wearing a uniform that Zekthal's experienced, I immediately recognized as belonging to a veteran commander. Behind her, through what appeared to be an observation window, space was filled with ships. Hundreds of ships. Ships that had not been there moments ago. "War Sovereign Zekthal," Admiral Chun said, her voice carrying across the void between fleets with perfect clarity. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun, commanding the 1st Terran Defense Fleet. Welcome to our home system." Zekthal found himself staring at vessels unlike anything in his experience. They were sleek and predatory, their hulls painted in matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of advanced propulsion systems, and their weapon ports were already glowing with barely contained energy. "Where do they come from?" Zekthal demanded of his sensor operator. I don't know, War Sovereign. They simply appeared. No hyperspace signatures, no gravitation disturbances. It's as if they were simply hidden. Admiral Chun continued speaking, and, despite himself, Zekthul found his attention drawn back to her words. For the past 3 years, she said, ever since we detected your approach, we have been preparing. You see, War Sovereign, humans have a particular talent that your species seems to lack. We learn from our mistakes. More importantly, we learn from our enemies. The display shifted, showing technical readouts that made Zekthul's blood run cold. Detailed schematics of Kithran ship designs, power systems, shield configurations, information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. 3 years ago, one of your scout vessels suffered a malfunction in our outer system, Chen explained. Your crew managed to repair their ship and continue on their mission, but they left something behind. Debris, metal fragments, computer components. We studied every molecule, reverse-engineered every system, learned every weakness. Zekthul remembered that incident, a minor technical failure that had delayed one of his advanced scouts for less than a day. Standard procedure required the crew to jettison damaged components rather than carry them back to the fleet. It had seemed insignificant at the time. You wanted to see our military capabilities, Chun continued, and now there was something predatory in her smile. Allow me to demonstrate. The human fleet opened fire. The weapons that lanced out from their ships were unlike anything in the Kithran arsenal. Instead of energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they fired concentrated streams of something that looked almost like liquid lightning, plasma contained in magnetic fields, and accelerated to tremendous velocities. When these weapons struck Kithran shields, they didn't simply impact and dissipate. They burrowed through the energy barriers like acid eating through metal, creating cascading failures that brought down entire defensive systems. The Eternal Dominion, a heavy cruiser that had participated in the conquest of 16-star systems, found itself facing a single human destroyer barely 1/10 its size. The Kithran vessel's captain, confident in his ship's superior firepower, ordered a direct engagement. His confidence lasted exactly 47 seconds. The human destroyer moved like a living thing, its engines allowing it to change direction and velocity in ways that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. It danced around the cruiser's weapons fire, staying just outside the optimal range of the Kithran guns while pummeling the larger ship with precise, surgical strikes that targeted specific systems. First, the cruiser's main engines went dark. Then its primary weapons array sparked and died. One by one, the systems that made it a proud vessel of the Kithran Empire were methodically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to know exactly where to aim. Throughout the Kithran formation, similar scenes were playing out. Ships that had conquered worlds were being outmaneuvered, outgunned, and systematically dismantled by human vessels that fought with a precision and tactical awareness that bordered on precognition. How are they doing this? Zekthul's tactical coordinator demanded, her voice rising with panic as she watched 3 more Kithran ships succumb to human fire. Our ships are superior in every measurable parameter. But Admiral Chun had already provided the answer, and Zekthul was beginning to understand its implications. The humans hadn't just studied Kithran technology, they had studied Kithran tactics. 3 years of analyzing scout reports, intercepted communications, and tactical databases had given them a complete picture of how the Empire fought its wars. The Kithrans had become predictable. All vessels, break formation. Zekthul commanded. Implement Dispersal Pattern 7. Target their capital ships, and War Sovereign, the communications officer, interrupted. Admiral Chun is transmitting again. The human commander's face reappeared on the screen, and now she was speaking for what appeared to be the bridge of a much larger vessel. Through the windows behind her, Zekthul could see more ships emerging from concealment. Massive, heavily armed dreadnoughts that dwarfed even his own flagship. You're wondering how he knew exactly what you would do, Chun said, as if she could read his thoughts across the void. Every formation change, every tactical adjustment, every desperate maneuver you're considering. We wargamed them all. You see, War Sovereign, the Kithran Empire's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. You have become so used to victory that you have forgotten how to adapt. As if to emphasize her point, a squadron of human fighters screamed past the bridge windows of the Crimson Extinction. They were tiny things barely larger than escape pods, but they moved with impossible speed and agility. Zekthul watched in horrified fascination as they engaged a Kitharan battlecruiser, their small weapons focusing on the ship's shield generators with surgical precision. Humans, on the other hand, Chun continued, have never forgotten what it means to be the underdog. We have been fighting impossible odds since we first picked up pointed sticks and faced down predators 10 times our size. It is what we do. The battlecruiser's shields collapsed under the concentrated fire of the human fighters, and larger vessels immediately moved in to deliver the killing blow. The once proud Kitharan warship died in a brilliant cascade of light and debris. Zekthul realized, with the sick certainty of a predator suddenly recognizing itself as prey, that he was watching the systematic destruction of the most powerful fleet in galactic history. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, and the space around Earth resembled a graveyard of metal and dreams. Debris from dozens of Kitharan vessels drifted through the void, their once proud hulls reduced to twisted fragments that caught and reflected the light of distant stars. The Crimson Extinction, War Sovereign Zekthul's mighty flagship, hung dead in space, its engines dark, its weapons silent, its crew trapped inside a vessel that had become their tomb. But Admiral Chun was not satisfied with victory. Victory was what happened when you defeated an enemy and sent them running back to whatever hole they had crawled out of. What she intended was something far more permanent. A lesson that would echo through the halls of the Kitharan Empire for the next 1,000 years. Status report. She ordered from the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful dreadnought. The massive vessel had been built in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt, its construction shrouded in secrecy and camouflaged by mining operations that had continued for 3 full years. 47 enemy vessels destroyed, reported Commander Martinez, her tactical officer. 18 disabled and drifting. The remaining Kitharan ships have attempted to withdraw to the outer system, but our pursuit squadrons are maintaining contact. Shin nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the current positions of both fleets. The Kitharans were running, their formations scattered and broken, their once disciplined advance turned into a desperate retreat toward the edge of the solar system. But they were not running fast enough. Signal the Wolfpack squadrons, she ordered. Begin the hunt. Across the solar system, human vessels that had been designed for one specific purpose received their orders and responded with predatory efficiency. These were not the massive dreadnoughts that had shattered the main Kitharan formation, nor were they the nimble fighters that had picked apart enemy shields. These were something else entirely. Fast, stealthy hunters built to track down fleeing enemies and ensure that none escaped to carry word of their defeat back to the Kitharan Empire. The UES Shadowhawk was one such vessel, a sleek predator that moved through space like a shark through dark water. Its captain, Commander Elena Vasquez, had spent the past hour tracking a damaged Kitharan destroyer that was limping toward the system's edge on failing engines. The enemy vessel was leaving a trail of radiation and debris that made it easy to follow, but Vasquez was not interested in easy prey. She was interested in making a statement. Bring us alongside their starboard quarter, she ordered her helmsman. I want them to see us coming. The Shadowhawk's engines flared to life, propelling the human vessel through space at velocities that would have been impossible without the advanced propulsion systems that Earth scientists had developed by studying Kitharan technology. But where the aliens had focused on raw power, humanity had concentrated on efficiency and stealth. The result was ships that could outrun and outmaneuver anything the Empire had ever built. On the bridge of the fleeing Kitharan destroyer, Subcommander Veltar watched his sensor displays with growing desperation. The human vessel had been following them for the better part of an hour, staying just outside weapons range, but never falling behind. It was like being stalked by a patient predator that knew its prey was wounded and growing weaker with each passing moment. Engineering reports main engines at 30% efficiency, his technical officer announced, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We're venting atmosphere faster than the recyclers can compensate. Veltar stared at the tactical display, where the human ship appeared as a red symbol that seemed to grow larger every time he looked at it. In his 40 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that fought like this. The humans didn't just destroy their opponents. They hunted them with a methodical, terrifying patience that spoke of predators who understood that the fear was often more valuable than the kill itself. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Veltar hesitated. In his experience, victorious enemies rarely bothered to communicate with their defeated foes. They simply destroyed them and moved on to the next target. But these humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. "Put it through," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of the human ship's bridge. The woman standing at its center was younger than Veltar had expected, probably in her 4th decade by human standards, with short-cropped dark hair and eyes that held no trace of mercy. When she spoke, her voice carried the casual confidence of someone who held absolute power over life and death. "Subcommander Veltar of the Kitharan destroyer Righteous Fury," Commander Vasquez said, and Veltar felt a chill run down his spine as he realized she knew his name, his rank, and his ship's designation. "I am Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth ship Shadowhawk. You are leaking atmosphere, your engines are failing, and your weapons are offline. In approximately 17 minutes, your life support systems will cease to function." Veltar found his voice with difficulty. "What do you want, human?" Vasquez smiled, and it was the sort of expression that belonged on the face of something with too many teeth. "I want you to understand something, Subcommander. Your war sovereign came to our system believing that we were prey. He was wrong. We are predators. We have always been predators. And predators don't just defeat their enemies, they eliminate them." On the tactical display, Veltar watched as more red symbols appeared. Human ships emerging from the asteroid belt, from the shadows of planets, from hiding places that should have been impossible to conceal military vessels. The space around his dying destroyer was suddenly filled with hunters, all of them moving with the coordinated precision of a pack that had rehearsed this moment countless times. However, Vasquez continued, "Predators also understand the value of a messenger. You're going to return to your empire, Subcommander. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain how the mighty Kitharan fleet was not just defeated, but annihilated by a species they considered primitive." Veltar's tactical officer looked up from her console, confusion evident in her expression. "Commander, our sensors are detecting an energy buildup in their weapons systems. If they intend to destroy us, why are they?" Her question was answered by a brilliant flash of light that illuminated the Shadowhawk's hull. But instead of the destructive beam that Veltar had expected, what emerged was something entirely different, a containment field that enveloped the Righteous Fury like a giant's fist, stopping its atmospheric venting and stabilizing its failing systems. "We are providing you with sufficient life support and propulsion capability to reach the edge of our system," Vasquez explained, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a lecture to particularly slow students. "From there, you will have enough power to send a hyperspace message to your empire. You will tell them that Earth is not a target for conquest. You will tell them that any Kitharan vessel entering this system will be destroyed. You will tell them that humanity remembers its enemies, and that we are very, very good at holding grudges." Across the solar system, similar scenes were being played out as human vessels tracked down the scattered remnants of the Kitharan fleet. Some enemy ships were destroyed outright, their crews preferring death to the shame of survival. Others were captured intact, their crews destined for interrogation and eventual return to the Empire with messages of their own to deliver. But In the asteroid belt, where the largest group of fleeing Kitherans had sought refuge among the rocky debris, something else was happening entirely. Captain James Morrison of the U.S. Vengeance had been tracking a squadron of enemy ships that included 2 heavy cruisers and a battle cruiser, vessels that still possessed enough firepower to be dangerous if they managed to regroup and organize a counterattack. Morrison had no intention of allowing that to happen. "All vessels, form up on my position," he ordered over the squadron communication channel. "We're going to demonstrate why humans have been apex predators on Earth for the past 50,000 years." The human ships moved through the asteroid field like ghosts, their advanced sensors allowing them to navigate the treacherous environment with ease while their prey struggled with damaged navigation systems and failing engines. The Kitherans had chosen their hiding place poorly. The asteroids that they thought would provide concealment were actually creating interference that blinded their sensors while having no effect on human tracking systems. "Target the battlecruiser first," Morrison ordered. "I want these aliens to understand that size and strength mean nothing when you're fighting an enemy that's smarter, faster, and more determined than you are." The attack came from all directions simultaneously. Human vessels emerged from behind asteroids like predators springing in ambush, their weapons already charged and targeted. The Kitheran battlecruiser, the Eternal Wrath, found itself facing 8 human destroyers that attacked with the coordinated precision of a pack of wolves bringing down an elk. But Morrison wasn't content with simple destruction. As his vessels pounded the enemy battlecruiser with precisely targeted shots that disabled its weapons and engines while leaving its crew compartments intact, he opened a communication channel that would broadcast his words to every surviving Kitheran in the system. "This is Captain James Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of human warfare. "You came to our home expecting to find sheep. Instead, you found wolves. Remember that when you return to your empire. Remember that there are species in this galaxy that you cannot conquer, cannot intimidate, and cannot break. Remember that humanity is one of them." The Eternal Wrath shields collapsed under the sustained assault, and its hull began to crack and split as focused energy beams carved through armor, plating like hot knives through butter. But Morrison's vessels continued their attack with surgical precision, crippling the enemy ship without destroying it outright. "And remember this most of all," Morrison continued, his voice now carrying a note of cold fury that seemed to echo through the vacuum of space itself. "We know where you come from now. We have studied your technology, learned your weaknesses, mapped your territories. If your empire ever threatens Earth again, we will not wait for you to come to us. We will come to you. And when we do, we will show your species what it truly means to face a Terran war beast." The human fleet had won more than a battle. They had sent a message that would echo through the Kitheran Empire for generations to come, a warning that would be whispered in the corridors of power and remembered in the deepest vaults of military history. Earth was no longer prey. Earth had become the hunter. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy had become a very different place. In the imperial palace of Kither Prime, the heart of an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 12 millennia, Emperor Thakmor stood before the vast crystalline windows of his throne room, staring out at a star-filled sky that no longer felt like his domain. Behind him, arranged in the traditional semicircle of supplication, knelt his remaining war sovereigns, the survivors of a military hierarchy that had been decimated by a single species from a backwater world that most Kitherans still couldn't pronounce correctly. "Rise," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying none of the absolute authority that had once made entire star systems tremble. These days, that voice carried something else entirely, the hollow echo of a predator who had suddenly discovered that there were bigger predators in the forest. War Sovereign Melketh, former commander of the Second Fleet and one of only 3 senior commanders to survive the human encounter, rose slowly to her feet. The ritual scars that covered her face, once marks of pride and conquest, now seemed to tell a story of failure and shame. When she spoke, Her words were chosen with the careful precision of someone who understood that careers and lives could be ended by the wrong syllable. "Your Imperial Majesty," she began, "the reports from our deep space reconnaissance vessels have been analyzed and confirmed. The humans have not remained content with their defensive victory. They are expanding." Emperor Thakmor turned away from the window, his four eyes focusing on Melketh with the intensity that had once made even his most experienced commanders nervous. "Explain." Melketh activated the holographic display that materialized in the center of the throne room, showing a three-dimensional map of the local galactic sector. Red dots indicated Kithran-controlled systems, scattered across the display like droplets of blood on black fabric. But now there were other symbols as well, blue dots that had appeared along the periphery of Kithran's space, growing in number with each passing month. "Human colonies," Melketh reported, her voice steady despite the implications of what she was revealing. "Established on worlds that our scouts had marked as uninhabitable. They appear to possess terraforming technology that exceeds our own capabilities by several orders of magnitude." The Emperor studied the display, his mind working through calculations that had kept the Kithran Empire alive for 12,000 years. The humans weren't simply defending their territory. They were claiming new territory, pushing outward with the relentless expansion of a species that had never learned to recognize limits. "What are their military capabilities?" he asked. Another war sovereign, Zekvan of the Fourth Fleet, stepped forward. He was younger than Melketh, his scars fewer but no less significant. The fact that he had survived the human encounter at all was due more to luck than skill. His fleet had been positioned on the far edge of the engagement zone when the battle began, allowing him to witness the systematic destruction of his comrades without being able to prevent it. "Your Majesty," Zekvan reported, "our intelligence indicates that the humans have not simply improved their existing technology. They have developed entirely new forms of warfare. Their vessels appear to operate using principles that our scientists cannot fully comprehend." The holographic display shifted, showing technical schematics of human warships that had been captured by long-range sensors. The vessels looked nothing like traditional spacecraft. They were sleek, organic-looking things that seemed to flow through space rather than simply traveling through it. Their weapons were equally mysterious, firing projectiles that behaved more like living creatures than simple munitions. "Furthermore," Zekvan continued, "our attempts to establish communication with neighboring empires have revealed a disturbing pattern. The Zelani Consortium reports that human vessels have been observed in their territory, not as invaders but as traders and diplomats. The Valdris Republic has established formal diplomatic relations with what they call the Terran Federation. The hegemony of SEK has signed a non-aggression pact with Earth." Emperor Thakmor felt something cold settle in his stomach. For 12,000 years, the Kithran Empire's primary diplomatic strategy had been simple: conquer first, negotiate never. It had worked because they had always been the strongest species in any given situation. But now, other empires were forming alliances with a species that had proven capable of defeating Kithran military might. The galaxy was choosing sides, and the Kithrans were discovering that they were no longer the obvious choice. "What do these other empires know about human capabilities that we do not?" the Emperor asked. War Sovereign Melketh exchanged glances with her colleagues before answering. "Your Majesty, our intelligence suggests that the humans have been sharing their military technology with their new allies. Not their most advanced systems, but enough to significantly upgrade the defensive capabilities of any species willing to sign mutual defense treaties with Earth." The implications hit the Emperor like a physical blow. The humans weren't just expanding their own territory. They were building a coalition of species that could potentially challenge Kithran supremacy across entire sectors of the galaxy. It was a strategy that the Empire had never encountered before, because it required something that Kithrans had never needed to develop: the ability to make others want to be your allies rather than simply forcing them to submit to your will. "Show me the human homeworld," he ordered. The display shifted again, focusing on the Sol system where humanity had first made its mark on galactic history. What the Emperor saw defied everything he understood about military strategy and interstellar warfare. The space around Earth was not simply defended. It had been transformed into the most heavily fortified system in known history. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the planet like a metallic ring, their surfaces bristling with weapons that could probably sterilize continents from thousands of kilometers away. The asteroid belt had been converted into a vast manufacturing complex, where automated factories produced warships at a rate that would have strained the resources of entire empires. The outer planets had been turned into naval bases and training facilities where new generations of human warriors learned their deadly trade. But most disturbing of all were the ships themselves. The human fleet had grown from the few hundred vessels that had destroyed the Kithran invasion force to several thousand ships of various classes, all of them incorporating technology that seemed to advance with each new vessel launched. They moved through space in formations that suggested not just military discipline, but genuine tactical innovation. How many worlds do they control now? The Emperor asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 43 confirmed colonies, Zekvan reported, with new settlements being established every few months. Their rate of expansion suggests they will control over 100 systems within the next 5 years. Emperor Thakmor closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 12,000 years of Kithran dominance pressing down upon his shoulders. His empire had built its entire philosophy around the concept of inevitable victory, the absolute certainty that Kithran military might could overcome any obstacle. That certainty had just died in the cold vacuum of space around a blue world whose inhabitants had taught the galaxy a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. Your Majesty, War Sovereign Melketh said quietly, there's one more thing you should know. 3 days ago, we received a communication from Earth, a formal diplomatic message addressed to you personally. The Emperor opened his eyes. From Admiral Chun? No, Your Majesty. From someone calling himself Ambassador David Harrison of the Terran Federation. The message requests a formal audience to discuss what he calls the establishment of peaceful relations between our respective civilizations. Emperor Thakmor stared at the holographic display, where the blue dot representing Earth pulsed like a beating heart at the center of an expanding web of human influence. For 12,000 years, the Kithran Empire had been the one to dictate terms to conquered species. Now, for the first time in imperial history, another species was offering to negotiate as equals. The truly terrifying part was that the humans weren't making this offer from a position of weakness. They were making it from a position of strength, as the victors of a conflict that had reshped the balance of power across multiple galactic sectors. They could afford to be magnanimous because they no longer had anything to fear from the empire that had once considered them prey. What do you recommend? He asked his war sovereigns. Melketh looked at her colleagues before answering. Your Majesty, our military advisors are unanimous in their assessment. A direct military confrontation with the Terran Federation would likely result in the complete destruction of the Empire. Their technology has advanced beyond our ability to counter it, and their alliance network ensures that any attack on Earth would result in retaliation from dozens of allied species. Furthermore, Zekvan added, our intelligence indicates that the humans have been studying other Kithran client species, learning their languages and cultures, understanding their grievances against imperial rule. If we were to initiate hostilities with Earth, we could face simultaneous rebellions across half our territory. The Emperor understood. The Kithrans had built their empire through fear and intimidation, but fear only worked when you were the most frightening thing in the neighborhood. The humans had proven that there were species in the galaxy who could not only resist Kithran military might, but actively defeat it. That knowledge would spread, and with it would come the understanding that the empire could be challenged, could be beaten, could be brought down by species that refused to accept subjugation. The age of Kithran dominance was ending. In its place, something new was rising. A galaxy where strength was measured not just in the size of one's fleet or the power of one's weapons, but in the willingness of others to stand beside you when the darkness came calling. The humans had mastered this new form of power, and they were using it to reshape the galaxy in ways that the Kithrans were only beginning to understand. Schedule the audience. Emperor Thakmor commanded. It appears that the Kithran Empire is about to learn what it means to be equals in a galaxy where we are no longer the apex predators. Outside the palace windows, the stars shone with their eternal light, witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations across the eons. Tonight, they were watching the end of one age and the beginning of another, marked not by conquest and subjugation, but by the emergence of a species that had looked at the vastness of space and decided that it was not empty at all. It was home, and Earth's children had finally come to claim their inheritance.